Marcus Chan had walked through 17 different spaceports in the last 6 months, and each time the result was the same. The moment his human identification appeared on any scanner, doors slammed shut. Jobs vanished. Transport ships suddenly became fully booked. He sat in the grimy corner of Kepler Station's cantina, nursing a drink that tasted like recycled coolant and cost more than most people made in a day. Around him, dozens of alien species mingled freely. Tall, elegant Veilthians with their crystal blue skin conducted business with short, stocky Gornak traders. Insectoid Zephyrians clicked their mandibles in what passed for laughter while sharing drinks with reptilian, Soros merchants. Everyone belonged somewhere. Everyone except Marcus. The human exile laws had been passed 3 years ago by the Galactic Council, after what they called the Terra incident. Marcus still remembered watching the news feeds, seeing his home planet of Earth stripped of its council membership and every human citizen banned from settling on any council world. The official reason was aggressive territorial expansion and violation of peaceful coexistence protocols. The real reason was fear. Humans had been too good at war, too good at adapting, too good at surviving where other species failed. In just 50 years since first contact, human colonies had spread to over 100 worlds. Human technology had advanced faster than anyone thought possible. Human military tactics had proven devastatingly effective in every border conflict. So the Council had voted. 14 species against 1. Humanity was to be contained to Earth and their existing colonies banned from Council space, cut off from galactic trade and civilization. Marcus had been off-world when the vote passed, working as a security contractor on a Veilthian mining operation. When he tried to return to Earth, he discovered the jump routes had been blocked. When he tried to find work, he learned that employing a human was now illegal in Council space. For 3 years, he'd survived on the edges, taking jobs in neutral systems, avoiding Council patrols, living ship to ship, station to station, always moving before someone noticed his species and reported him. He was down to his last few credits when the cantina's lights suddenly dimmed. Emergency broadcasts began blaring from every screen and speaker in the station. Attention all beings. This is Admiral Kithara of the Galactic Defense Fleet. Unknown hostile forces have attacked the outer rim colonies of Zarian Prime, Culdra 7, and New Arcturus. Preliminary reports indicate complete destruction of all settlements. No survivors detected. The cantina fell silent. Marcus set down his drink, his soldier's instincts immediately analyzing the tactical implications. 3 worlds, all in the same sector, all wiped out simultaneously. That required coordination, overwhelming firepower, and intimate knowledge of Council defenses, the broadcast continued. All Council fleets are being recalled to defend core worlds. Commercial traffic in outer rim sectors is suspended immediately. All civilian vessels should proceed to the nearest major system for protection. Panic erupted around Marcus as aliens began shouting in a dozen different languages. Frantically trying to contact families and businesses in the affected sectors, he remained calm, his mind working through possibilities. Admiral Kithara's voice cut through the noise again. Intelligence suggests these attackers are not from any known Council species. Repeat, we are facing an unknown enemy with technology that exceeds our current defensive capabilities. Marcus almost smiled. The Council had spent decades building their military around fighting other Council species. They designed their strategies around known technologies, known tactics, known ways of thinking. They'd grown complacent fighting wars where everyone followed the same basic rules. His personal communicator buzzed. Marcus frowned, checking the display. It was an encrypted message from a frequency he didn't recognize. Using military-grade security that should have been impossible to breach, the message was brief. Human, Doc 94, come alone. Time is short. Marcus weighed his options. It could be a trap. Council security might have finally tracked him down. But with alien fleets pulling back to core worlds, the outer rim would become a war zone. Staying here meant being caught between an unknown enemy and panicking Council forces. He finished his drink and made his way through the crowded corridors toward Dock 94, the station's usual bustle had. turned into barely controlled chaos as species tried to book passage to safer systems. Security forces were overwhelmed, and in the confusion, no one paid attention to one more traveler moving purposefully through the crowd. Dock 94 was in the station's old industrial section, where the lights were dimmer and the air recycling systems struggled to keep up. Most of the berths here were used for cargo haulers and salvage ships that couldn't afford premium docking fees. Marcus found a sleek, unmarked vessel that definitely didn't belong in this section. Its hull was made from some kind of adaptive metal he didn't recognize, and its engine configuration suggested it could outrun most military interceptors. A figure stepped out of the shadows near the ship's ramp. Female, humanoid, but with silver skin that seemed to shimmer in the artificial light. Her eyes were completely black, and when she spoke, her voice carried an odd harmonic resonance. Marcus Chun, former Earth Defense Force, rank of Major, specialized in asymmetric warfare and hostile environment operations. Who's asking? Marcus kept his hand near the plasma pistol concealed under his jacket. My name is Zara. I represent certain interests that have been observing your species for some time. We believe you may be able to help with our current ... problem. The attacks on the rim worlds? Those were just the beginning. Zara gestured toward her ship. The force that destroyed those colonies is not from your galaxy. They are called the Devourers, and they consume everything in their path. Matter, energy, even the quantum foundation of space itself. Marcus studied her carefully. Her body language suggested she was telling the truth, but he'd learned not to trust anyone completely. What does this have to do with me? The Galactic Council's response to the Devourer threat has been predictable. They're consolidating their fleets around major population centers and preparing for a defensive war. They believe they can hold key systems until they develop new weapons to counter Devourer technology. Sounds reasonable. It's a losing strategy. The Devourers don't fight defensive wars. They don't negotiate. They don't retreat. They consume everything and move on to the next target. The Council's defensive posture will simply allow them to methodically destroy one system after another until nothing remains. Marcus nodded slowly. He'd seen this kind of strategic thinking before, from generals who'd spent too long fighting civilized wars against civilized enemies. So you need someone who thinks differently. Your species has a unique approach to warfare. Where other races see impossible odds, humans see tactical opportunities. Where others retreat, humans adapt and overcome. We've studied your military history, Major Chun, from primitive warfare to interstellar conflicts. Humans consistently defeat superior forces through unconventional tactics and sheer determination. The Council didn't seem to appreciate those qualities. Zara's expression shifted slightly, possibly indicating amusement. The Council feared your species because they recognized your potential. That same potential may now be the galaxy's only hope. An explosion echoed through the station, followed by emergency alarms. Through the dock's viewports, Marcus could see flashes of weapons fire in space. The Devourers had found Kepler Station. We're out of time, Zara said, already moving toward her ship. Come with me, and you'll have a chance to prove that humanity deserves a place among the stars. Stay here and die with the rest of this station. Marcus watched Council defense platforms explode in brilliant flashes outside. The station's shields were failing under assault from weapons that shouldn't exist. Through it all, he felt a familiar calm settling over him. It was the same feeling he'd had during the worst battles of his military career, when everything seemed hopeless, but his mind automatically began searching for solutions. He'd been running for 3 years, hiding from a galaxy that didn't want him. But running had never been humanity's strength. Fighting against impossible odds, finding ways to win when victory seemed impossible, refusing to surrender even when defeat was certain, that was what humans did best. Marcus walked up the ramp into Zara's ship. All right. Let's see what these Devourers are made of. The ship's engine spun up with a sound like music, and as they lifted off from the dying station, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced since his exile began. Purpose behind them. Kepler Station erupted in flames as Devourer ships tore through its hull like paper. The emergency broadcasts had stopped. The evacuation signals had gone silent. In the space of minutes, 30,000 beings had simply ceased to exist, but as Zara's ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying the galaxy's most unwanted soldier toward an enemy that had never faced human determination, Marcus Chun began to plan. The Council had exiled humanity to protect their comfortable, predictable galaxy. Now that galaxy was burning, and they would need the very qualities they'd feared to save it. The irony wasn't lost on him. They'd called humans too dangerous for civilized space. They were about to learn just how right they'd been. The ship's interior defied everything Marcus thought he knew about spacecraft design. Surfaces flowed like liquid metal, reforming themselves based on function rather than aesthetics. Displays appeared in midair when needed, then dissolved when their purpose was served. Even the gravity felt different, as if the ship itself was alive and adapting to its occupants. Temporal displacement technology, Zara explained as she guided him to what served as the command center. My people learn to work with time rather than against it. Space and matter are much more cooperative when you approach them correctly. Marcus ran his hand along a wall that felt warm and slightly yielding. Your people aren't from this galaxy either. Correct. We come from what you would call a parallel dimension, one where the Devourers consumed everything over 2 million years ago. I'm one of the last survivors. The command center materialized around them as they entered, screens and controls forming from the ship's living metal. Marcus found himself looking at tactical displays that showed the current state of the galaxy in real time. Red markers indicated Devourer positions. Blue markers showed Council fleet deployments. The strategic situation was even worse than Marcus had imagined. They're making the same mistakes we made, Zara said, manipulating the display to show projected battle outcomes. Consolidating forces, fighting defensively. Trying to protect everything instead of accepting losses to achieve strategic goals. Marcus studied the fleet positions with a soldier's eye. They're thinking like politicians, not warriors. They can't accept that some systems will be lost. The Devourers have already adapted to Council tactics. Watch this. The display shifted to show footage from the attack on Zarian Prime. Marcus watched in silence as Devourer ships emerged from what looked like tears in space itself. Their vessels were wrong somehow, as if they existed partially outside normal reality. They moved in ways that violated basic physics, appearing in multiple locations simultaneously, before consolidating into devastating attack formations. But it was their weapons that truly disturbed him. Instead of energy beams or projectiles, they fired streams of absolute nothingness that erased whatever they touched from existence. Matter, energy, even space itself simply ceased where those weapons struck. Council shields can't stop them, Zara continued. Energy disperses across dimensional boundaries. Matter is converted directly to void. Traditional armor becomes a liability because it provides more mass for conversion. Marcus watched the planetary defense grid around Zarian Prime dissolve like sugar in acid. The planet's surface followed moments later, reality itself unraveling until nothing remained but empty space. How do you fight something like that? In my dimension, we tried everything. Bigger weapons. Better shields. New technologies. Nothing worked because we were thinking conventionally? The Devourers don't exist fully in our reality, so our reality-based weapons can't truly harm them. The tactical displays shifted to show current Devourer movements. They weren't advancing in the straight lines that Council strategists expected. Instead, they moved in complex patterns that seemed random until Marcus realized what he was seeing. They're not just conquering territory. They're harvesting it. Exactly. They consume the quantum foundations of matter and energy, converting it into something they can use to sustain their existence between dimensions. Every world they devour makes them stronger. Marcus studied the consumption patterns, his mind automatically analyzing the logistics involved. How long does the process take? From initial attack to complete planetary consumption, approximately 6 standard hours. And how many ships in a typical Devourer fleet? Between 50 and 200 vessels, depending on the target's defensive capabilities. Marcus nodded, pieces of a plan beginning to form. Human military doctrine had always emphasized speed, mobility, and unconventional thinking. While Council forces tried to match the Devourers ship for ship, humans would approach the problem differently. I need to see their command structure in action. Are there any live engagements I can observe? Zara manipulated the controls, and the display shifted to show a real-time battle in the Rigel system. 3 Council fleets totaling nearly 1,000 ships had taken defensive positions around the system's populated worlds. The Devourers had responded by sending exactly 60 vessels. The battle was a massacre. Devourer ships phased in and out of normal space, striking from angles that shouldn't exist. Council vessels found themselves firing at targets that were simultaneously present and absent. When they did manage to score hits, their weapons passed harmlessly through Devourer hulls that existed in overlapping dimensional states. The Council commanders are trying to use traditional line-of-battle tactics, Marcus observed. Formation fighting with overlapping fields of fire. Standard military doctrine for the past 3,000 years. It served them well against conventional enemies. But these aren't conventional enemies. Marcus watched as another Council dreadnought simply vanished under Devourer fire. They're fighting ghosts with solid weapons? The battle ended within 20 minutes. 60 Devourer ships had destroyed nearly 1,000 Council vessels while taking no apparent damage themselves. The surviving Council forces retreated in disorder as Devourer ships began the methodical consumption of 3 billion inhabited worlds. This is why we need human tactical thinking, Zara said quietly. Your species has always excelled at finding weaknesses in seemingly invulnerable enemies. Marcus was silent for several minutes, processing what he'd seen. Finally, he turned to face Zara directly. You said the Devourers exist partially outside our reality. That means they also exist partially inside it. And anything that exists in our reality can be affected by our reality's physics. Our scientists reached the same conclusion, but we were never able to exploit that weakness. Because you were thinking like scientists instead of soldiers. Marcus moved to the tactical display, manipulating it to show Devourer ship configurations. Look at their attack patterns. They phase into normal space to fire their weapons, then phase back out to avoid return fire. But there's a transition period where they exist in both states simultaneously. Less than 0.003 seconds. No conventional targeting system can track them during phase transitions. Who said anything about conventional targeting? Marcus smiled for the first time since boarding Zara's ship. In human military history, we've always succeeded by changing the rules of engagement. If you can't target the enemy, you target where they're going to be. Marcus began sketching out tactical scenarios using the ship's display system. His plan was audacious, requiring precise timing and the kind of coordinated, multi-vector assault that human commanders had perfected during the colonial wars. The Council has been trying to destroy Devourer ships directly, but their ships aren't the real target. The dimensional rifts they use for phasing in and out of our reality, those exist completely in our space. Collapse enough rifts simultaneously, and you trap their ships in normal space where they can be destroyed by conventional weapons. Zara studied his tactical projections. The energy requirements would be enormous, and you'd need to synchronize attacks across multiple light-years of space with split-second timing, which is why this won't work with Council technology or Council tactics. But humans have something the Council doesn't, a willingness to risk everything on a single decisive action. The ship's communication system suddenly activated, broadcasting an emergency Council session. Admiral Kithra's face appeared on the main display, her usual composure cracking under the strain of continuous defeats. The Devourer advance has accelerated beyond all projections. 12 more systems have fallen in the past 6 hours. At this rate, they will reach the core worlds within 48 standard hours. Marcus and Zara listened as Council representatives, argued desperately about evacuation plans and last-ditch defensive strategies. Fear and desperation colored every word. The Shandari delegate has proposed a complete withdrawal to the galactic core, abandoning the outer two-thirds of Council space to the Devourers. Velthian Fleet Command believes we should mass all remaining forces for a single decisive engagement. At the Centauri Gate. Intelligence reports suggest the Devourers may be vulnerable to quantum resonance weaponry, but testing would require at least 3 months of development time. Marcus shook his head. Even facing extinction, the Council couldn't abandon their committee-based decision-making and bureaucratic procedures. They were trying to solve a military crisis with political solutions. They're going to lose, he said simply. Unless someone changes the equation, Zara replied. My ship can reach the front lines in 18 hours. If your plan has any chance of success, we need to implement it before the Council forces are completely destroyed. Marcus looked at the tactical displays one more time, running through the logistics and timing requirements. His plan required resources he didn't have, coordination with forces that considered him an enemy, and technology that barely existed. By any rational analysis, it was doomed to failure, but rational analysis had never been humanity's greatest strength. Set course for the Aurora Nebula, he said. There's a human research station there that's been off the grid since the Exile. If my old unit commander is still alive, he'll have exactly what we need. The Aurora Nebula Research Station hung in space like a forgotten monument to human ingenuity. Its hull was scarred from meteor impacts and jury-rigged modifications, but Marcus could see the familiar lines of Earth Defense Force architecture beneath the improvised additions. I'm reading 17 human life signs aboard, Zara reported as they approached the station's docking bay, and some very interesting energy signatures that don't match any known technology. Marcus smiled grimly. That would be Colonel Sarah Hayes. If anyone could turn a research station into a weapons laboratory, it would be her? The docking bay doors opened to reveal a reception committee of armed humans in modified military gear. Their weapons were trained on Zara's ship, but Marcus recognized their stance, ready but not immediately hostile. Professional soldiers assessing a potential threat. Marcus Chun, you magnificent bastard! The voice boomed through the communication system as a familiar figure strode across the docking bay. Colonel Hayes looked older, her hair now completely gray, but her bearing remained unmistakably military. 3 years without a word, and you show up during the galaxy's worst crisis. Should I be surprised? Good to see you too, Sarah. Permission to come aboard? Granted, but your alien friend stays on the ship until we know what we're dealing with. Marcus disembarked alone, accepting brief embraces from old comrades he'd thought were dead. The Aurora station crew consisted of 17 humans, the last remnants of a classified research project that had been forgotten during the chaos of exile. What have you been working on out here? Marcus asked as Hayes led him through corridors lined with jury-rigged equipment. Officially? Deep space quantum research. Unofficially? Hayes gestured to a massive device that dominated the station's main laboratory. We've been developing ways to make those council bastards regret exiling us. The device looked like a fusion of human engineering and alien technology, bristling with energy conduits and quantum field generators. Marcus had seen similar configurations in theoretical papers about dimensional manipulation, but nothing this advanced should have been possible with purely human resources. We've had some help, Hayes continued, noting his expression. Turns out a few alien species weren't too happy about the exile vote either. The Kresh Foundation provided quantum manipulation theory. The Solari Collective gave us dimensional phase technology. Even got some technical specifications from draconian separatists. What does it do? Creates controlled dimensional rifts. We can punch holes between realities, manipulate quantum fields across interstellar distances, and theoretically destabilize any technology that relies on dimensional phasing. Hayes paused. Why? What kind of trouble are you in this time? Marcus activated his personal display unit and showed Hayes the tactical situation. The colonel's expression grew increasingly grim as she absorbed the scope of the Devourer threat. Jesus Christ, Marcus. The entire council fleet can't stop these things? They're fighting the last war instead of this one. Traditional tactics don't work against enemies that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Marcus outlined his plan. showing how coordinated dimensional rift collapses could trap Devourer ships in normal space. I need your device, Sarah, and I need every human pilot willing to fly a suicide mission. Hayes was quiet for several minutes, studying the tactical projections. Finally, she looked up at Marcus with the expression he remembered from their worst battles. Together, you're talking about taking on an invasion fleet with 17 humans and some experimental technology. 18 humans. I'm going to. Against several hundred ships that just destroyed the Council's best fleets. That's right. Hayes began to laugh, the kind of laughter that emerged from situations so impossible they became liberating. You know what, Marcus? Fuck the Council. They wanted us gone because we were too dangerous. Let's show them exactly how dangerous humans can be when we're properly motivated. Within 6 hours, Aurora Station had been transformed into a military command center. Hayes and her team worked with desperate efficiency to modify their dimensional rift device for combat deployment. Meanwhile, Marcus coordinated with Zara to establish communication with scattered human settlements throughout neutral space. The response exceeded his expectations. Word spread quickly through human exile networks, and volunteers began arriving from across the galaxy. Traders, miners, salvage crews, former military personnel, all united by their shared rejection from Council space. By the time the makeshift human fleet assembled, Marcus commanded 37 ships of various types and configurations. It wasn't much by Council standards, but every vessel was crewed by humans who had survived 3 years of exile through determination, ingenuity, and sheer stubbornness. The Devourer main fleet is approaching the Centauri system, Zara reported from her position as Fleet Intelligence Coordinator. Council forces are massing for a final defensive engagement. They'll be overwhelmed within hours. Marcus stood in Aurora Station's command center, surrounded by jury-rigged displays showing the tactical situation throughout the galaxy. The Devourer advance had accelerated beyond all projections. 23 star systems had been completely consumed, their matter converted into energy that strengthened the invasion fleet. "This is it," he announced to his assembled captains. "We get one chance to change the outcome of this war. The plan requires perfect timing and absolute coordination." Any questions? Captain Rodriguez of the mining vessel Persistence raised his hand. "What are our odds of survival?" "Honestly? Close to 0. Marcus met the man's gaze steadily. "The Council exiled us because they thought humans were too dangerous for civilized space. Today we prove them right." The human fleet departed Aurora Nebula in tight formation, their disparate vessels united by quantum communication links that Hayes had developed from captured Devourer technology. They jumped through hyperspace on a course that would intercept the Devourer main fleet just as it engaged Council forces at Centauri. Marcus rode aboard Zara's ship, which served as the fleet's command vessel. As they approached the battle zone, he reviewed the tactical plan one final time. Everything depended on precise timing and the willingness of human crews to sacrifice themselves for a galaxy that had rejected them. "Dropping out of hyperspace in 30 seconds, Zara announced. "I'm detecting massive energy signatures ahead. The battle has already begun." The Centauri system emerged around them in all its terrible glory. 400 Council ships formed defensive lines around the system's inhabited worlds, their combined firepower creating brilliant displays of energy that lit up the vacuum. Facing them were 67 Devourer vessels, their impossible geometries, shifting between dimensions as they methodically destroyed everything in their path. "Council forces are falling back too?" "Secondary defensive positions," reported Lieutenant Kim from the communications station. "They've lost over 100 ships in the first engagement." Marcus watched the battle unfold with growing certainty. The Council was fighting exactly as he'd predicted, defensively, reactively, trying to protect fixed positions against an enemy that moved through space like ghosts. They would lose everything within an hour. "All ships execute deployment pattern Alpha," he commanded. "Remember, we're not trying to destroy the Devourer ships directly. We're collapsing the dimensional rifts that allow them to phase between realities. The human fleet scattered across the battle zone in carefully calculated positions. Each ship carried a modified dimensional rift generator that Hayes had built from her research data. When activated simultaneously, they would create a quantum field collapse that trapped anything using dimensional phasing technology. Target acquisition complete, reported Captain Santos from the salvage hauler Redemption. Dimensional rifts identified and locked, standing by for synchronized activation, added Captain Lee from the transport Golden Dawn. Marcus felt the familiar calm that always settled over him before major battles. Around him, his makeshift fleet of exiles and outcasts prepared to attempt something that no military academy would have approved. They were going to save a civilization that had cast them out, using tactics that violated every conventional understanding of space warfare. Council fleet is retreating to tertiary positions, Kim reported. Devourer ships are beginning consumption protocols on the inner planets. Marcus watched as streams of nothingness began erasing Centauri's inhabited worlds. Billions of beings were dying while their government's fleets fell back in disorder. The Council's defensive strategy was collapsing exactly as predicted. Execute Operation Exile, he commanded. 37 human ships activated their dimensional rift generators simultaneously. The quantum field that resulted was invisible to normal sensors, but its effects were immediately apparent. Devourer ships suddenly found themselves trapped in normal space, their phase-shifting abilities neutralized by the massive, dimensional distortion. For the first time since the invasion began, Devourer vessels were vulnerable. All Council ships. This is Major Marcus Chun of the Human Defense Force, he broadcast on all frequencies. Devourer ships are trapped in normal space for approximately 90 seconds. Concentrate all firepower on their main fleet units immediately. The Council forces responded with the reflexes of trained military personnel. Despite their